The studio lights blazed down, capturing every flicker of tension as the debate reached its boiling point. Byron Donalds, chest puffed, voice raised, leaned forward in his chair as if sheer volume could win the night. He interrupted, jabbed with his finger, and tried to bulldoze his way past every point Jasmine Crockett had made. His tone dripped with condescension, his eyes sharp with the kind of confidence that comes from believing he had the upper hand. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't match his volume. She didn't roll her eyes or fire back with the same heat. Instead, she leaned in closer to the mic, her voice low, steady, and razor-sharp. And then came the sentence. One line, one perfectly timed, devastatingly. A precise sentence that sliced through the noise like a blade. The audience gasped. The moderator's jaw tightened. Donald's face froze, his rehearsed bravado collapsing into visible panic. His eyes darted, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. In a single moment, power dynamics flipped. But how did one sentence flip the entire debate on its head? The night had been billed as just another televised debate, two opposing sides, sharp exchanges, and the predictable back and forth that fills political airtime. But the moment the cameras turned on, it became clear this would be different. The air inside the studio wasn't just tense, it was electric. Bright stage. Lights bore down on the panelists, bouncing off polished desks and gleaming microphones. Every cough, every shuffle of papers, every whispered word seemed amplified in the stillness before the storm. Byron Donalds wasted no time seizing the spotlight. He leaned forward in his chair, his suit jacket pulled tight across his shoulders. As he gestured with wide, commanding movements, his voice thundered across the stage, rising above the moderator's attempts to keep order. To him, control didn't come from reason. It came from volume. He dismissed Jasmine Crockett with a wave of his hand. He mocked her with smirks that lingered too long. Every time she tried to interject, he raised his voice just a notch higher, talking over her with the arrogance of someone who thought the crowd was already in his pocket. His words weren't just arguments. They were jabs, sharpened with condescension. And for a while, it seemed to work. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Donalds powered through every interruption.
Ow.
The camera zoomed, and on his face, capturing the glint in his eyes, the look of a man certain he was untouchable. To him, Crockett wasn't an opponent. She was an obstacle. When he believed he could simply bulldoze with bravado, the narrator's voice cuts in. He thought he had control. But while Donalds performed for the cameras, Crockett's silence was far from weakness. She didn't rush to counter him. She didn't let frustration crack her composure. Instead, she studied him with the patience of someone who had seen this playbook before. Every exaggerated gesture, every smirk, every booming interruption, none of it rattled her. If anything, it only made her timing sharper. The tension in the room built with each exchange. The moderator shuffled nervously, trying to keep the debate on track. The audience shifted again, some leaning forward, sensing something bigger was about to unfold. Donalds, however, was too caught up in his own performance to notice. He doubled down, mocking, dismissing, layering insult after insult, as if sheer repetition could wear down his opponent. And then came the pause, split-second window, so small it could have gone unnoticed. Donalds stopped to catch his breath. Certain he had steamrolled the moment, his smirk widened as he leaned back, confident that Crockett would have no way out. But Crockett's eyes didn't flinch. Her posture didn't waver. She leaned forward, calm and deliberate, as if she had been waiting for this opening all along. The audience could feel it. The air seemed to shift. Even Donald's confident grin began to stiffen, as though some instinct warned him that the ground beneath him was about to give way. The narrator's voice returns, heavy with anticipation. But Jasmine had seen this before, and she was ready. To truly grasp why this debate moment mattered, you have to understand who Jasmine Crockett is, and why she doesn't flinch when the pressure rises. Born in St. Louis, Jasmine didn't grow up in political privilege or inherited influence. She grew up in the middle of America, in a world where fighting for fairness wasn't a theory, it was survival. Before she ever touched a microphone in Congress, she was in the trenches of justice, serving as a civil rights attorney, representing people who had no voice, no power, and no chance against a system tilted against them. In packed courtrooms, under fluorescent lights, she stood against prosecutors and institutions who thought they could bulldoze her clients. That's where Jasmine learned the art of calm under fire. When judges barked, when opposing counsel slammed stacks of papers, when the stakes were freedom itself, Jasmine didn't yell. She didn't rattle. She measured her words, placed her evidence like chess pieces, let the truth itself do the striking. That training forged her into something rare in politics, a fighter who doesn't need volume to win, asterisk by the time she stepped into Congress. Jasmine carried that courtroom steel with her. Colleagues noticed quickly. While others snapped under the lights of hearings, Jasmine seemed to grow sharper. The hotter it got, the steadier she became. It wasn't just a skill, it was her identity. And that's what set up this clash with Byron Donalds. Because Byron, he's the opposite. He thrives on theatrics, on dominating a room by sheer force of personality. He's charismatic, confident, and he knows how to raise his tone just enough to drown opponents in noise. In his world, debates are about power projection, not persuasion. And usually it works. People hesitate, stumble, or retreat under his intensity, but not Jasmine. As the cameras rolled that night and Byron's voice thundered, she didn't blink. Her calmness wasn't weakness. It was her weapon. She let him swing, let him rant. Let him fill the air with all the bluster he could summon, because Jasmine knew something Byron didn't. When a storm meets stone, the storm always passes. Her backstory explains why. In court, she had gone up against worse. She had watched men twice her age underestimate her, only to watch their cases crumble when she slid a single piece of evidence across the table. She had seen arrogance collapse. Before, not because she shouted louder, but because she refused to play the same game, that history mattered in this moment. While the studio lights reflected off Byron's polished energy, Jasmine's presence radiated something else, unshakable composure. The audience could feel it. It was magnetic, and in that calm, something electric was building. You could sense it in her posture, in the way she leaned forward ever so slightly toward the mic. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't scrambling. She was waiting for the exact second to strike. That's the magic of Jasmine Crockett. Her battles aren't reactive. They're precise. It's why her supporters love her, why so many Americans see her as more than just a politician. She represents the idea that dignity is stronger than arrogance. Truth is louder than noise. The cameras, the crowd, the commentators, everyone thought Byron had the upper hand as he threw verbal punches. But Jasmine, she wasn't in a fight. She was in control of the moment, because she'd been here 1,000 times before, and that steel spine, the one forged in courtroom battles, hardened in fights for the voiceless, had prepared her for one very specific clash, a clash with Byron Donalds. The first 15 minutes of the debate felt less like a civil exchange of ideas and more like a storm gathering speed. Byron Donalds had come in swinging sharp quips, half-jokes layered with insults, and interruptions so frequent they practically became his rhythm. Every time Jasmine Crockett began a point, Donalds would jump in with a smirk. Hold on. Let me correct this nonsense before it goes too far." The audience chuckled the first couple of times. But as his interruptions grew louder and more aggressive, the laughter thinned. What started as amusement was quickly turning into unease. Donald sensed it but pressed harder. He leaned back in, his chair flashing a grin, tossing out sarcastic barbs. "Oh, here we go again with the victim routine. Spare us the lecture, Congresswoman. You sound more like a TikTok activist than a policymaker." The host, caught between the two, tried to steer things back. "Gentlemen, Congresswoman, please, let's stick to policy." His voice betrayed nervousness. He could feel the studio slipping from his control, but Donalds wasn't done. He raised his voice not just to Crockett but to the entire room. "You people want to rewrite history, twist facts, and pretend the truth doesn't matter. Duh. Not letting that slide tonight." The air thickened. Viewers at home could feel it through their screens. The audience inside the studio began to shift in their seats, murmurs rolling through the crowd like distant thunder. Jasmine, however, didn't flinch. She sat poised, shoulders squared, eyes steady on Donald's. Her silence in the face of his. Rant spoke louder than any interruption could. Donalds noticed, and it rattled him. His words began to spill faster, almost tripping over each other. You think your calm act is impressive? It's not. And weak leaders don't survive in Washington. That's when the tension hit its peak. The studio no longer felt like a debate hall. It felt like a pressure cooker ready to burst. The host's paper shook slightly in his hand. A camera. Operator adjusted focus nervously, knowing this was becoming the moment. And then, Jasmine moved. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't wave her hands. She simply leaned forward, her face calm, her tone precise. Her eyes locked on Donald's. The audience went silent in anticipation. And with just one sentence, she prepared to flip the entire debate on its head. The storm had been building all night. Byron Donalds, shoulders squared, voice pitched to dominate, thought he had Jasmine exactly where he wanted her. He'd mocked, interrupted, and tried to paint her as unprepared. Each time the host attempted to intervene, Donalds surged louder. Hammering over both Crockett and the moderators, the room felt claustrophobic. Cameras zoomed tighter. The audience, once murmuring in amusement at Donald's swagger, was beginning to shift uncomfortably. A few faces betrayed irritation. Others leaned forward, waiting, almost hoping for a counterstrike. And then it happened. Jasmine. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't match his volume or throw a verbal punch back. Instead, she leaned into her microphone, eyes steady, posture still, and delivered a single line that cut sharper than anything Donalds had launched. All evening, if volume were vision, Congressman, you'd see a whole lot more than you actually do. Silence. The studio froze. For a split second, it was as though someone had pulled the power cord out of the debate itself. Donalds blinked, his mouth half open, suddenly at a loss. The bravado melted. The redness crept up his cheeks. His voice, so commanding moments earlier, caught in his throat as he tried to formulate a comeback. The audience gasped, then erupted. A wave of laughter, applause, and disbelief filled the studio. Some stood to clap. Others slapped the tables in front of them. The sound wasn't just noise. It was validation. Collective recognition that they had witnessed a turning point. The host's eyebrows shot up. He glanced at the cameras, then back at Jasmine, almost incredulous. His lips curved into a subtle grin, the kind of grin that says, did that really just happen? Byron Donalds scrambled to recover. He leaned forward, his voice cracking just slightly as he attempted to pivot into another attack. But every word he forced out now sounded defensive, forced, hollow. He waved his hand dismissively. But it was too late. The energy in the room had already shifted. The audience wasn't with him anymore. They were with Jasmine, and online. The moment exploded in real time. Within minutes, Twitter was ablaze. Clips of Jasmine's sentence were clipped, edited, and replayed. Hashtags like #Donalds shutdown and #Crockett vision began trending. Meme creators wasted no time slapping Donald's stunned expression onto movie stills, reaction, GIFs, and viral templates. One particularly brutal meme showed him holding a megaphone with the caption, "Still can't see." Journalists who had been live tweeting the debate stopped mid-thread to acknowledge the moment. One political reporter wrote, "I've covered 100 debates. Rarely do you see a single line end an opponent's entire strategy. Tonight, Jasmine Crockett did that." On TikTok, the clip became background audio for creators lip-syncing her words, mocking moments when people mistake noise for intelligence. On Instagram, edits spread with dramatic slow-motion effects. Jasmine's calm delivery set against cinematic music, but the most telling reaction wasn't on social media or even in the studio. It was on Donald's face. This was a man who had come into the debate with a game plan. Overwhelm, dominate, interrupt. And for nearly the entire evening, it had worked. Until that one sentence stripped the strategy bare. exposed it for what it was, sound without substance. He tried again to regain footing. Well, he stammered. That's a nice little jab, Congresswoman. Let me tell you. The words landed with a thud. The sharpness was gone. The authority evaporated. He sounded like a man who knew he had been cornered, forced into defense against an attack he never saw coming. Meanwhile, Jasmine didn't push further. She didn't need to, simply leaned back in her chair, folded her hands, and waited. The restraint was as powerful as the line itself. She knew the audience was still buzzing, knew the cameras were still fixed on her. She knew deep down that the message had landed. The brilliance of that mic drop wasn't just the cleverness of the sentence. It was what it represented. She exposed a fundamental truth in Donald's approach, that bluster is not vision and noise is not leadership. The elegance of her response was that it dismantled his entire performance with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The host finally cut in. All right, let's move on, though his grin betrayed that even he knew the debate had been decided. But the cameras lingered, a moment longer on Donald's. His eyes darted, his smile faltered. The once commanding presence now seemed diminished, smaller. He shifted in his seat, pulling at his tie as if the room had suddenly grown hotter. That's the power of one sentence. And the country felt it. Cable news shows replayed the clip within hours. Analysts broke it down like sports commentators reviewing a game-winning shot. Look at the timing, one panelist noted. She waited until he overextended, then delivered a precise counter. Another added, Donalds didn't just lose that exchange, he lost the narrative of the entire debate. Late-night comedians jumped in, replaying his stunned reaction before rolling into monologues. One quipped, Donalds learned tonight that shouting isn't the same as seeing. Somebody get the man a pair of glasses and maybe a mute button. By sunrise the next morning, millions had watched the clip across platforms. What was supposed to be just another heated debate had turned into a cultural moment, a symbolic clash between noise and clarity, arrogance and composure, and all of it hinged on one sentence. The line became a rallying cry, repeated in comment. Sections retweeted by celebrities, quoted in editorials. Some called it the best debate takedown of the year. Others argued it was bigger than politics, that it symbolized a cultural craving for calm, cutting truth in an age of endless shouting. But as powerful as the reaction was, the story wasn't ending there, because while the studio, the audience, and the internet were still reeling from the blow, the true shockwaves of Jasmine's mic drop were only beginning. The moment Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and delivered that one sentence. The studio may have erupted, but what followed in the hours and days after was even louder. Within minutes, clips of the exchange began circulating online. On Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, the hashtag Jasmine Shuts DONALDS lit up timelines. The raw footage of Byron Donalds' frozen reaction was looped, slowed down, and remixed with music. One trending edit set his stunned face to the sound of a record scratch, captioned, and at this moment, Byron knew. Another had Jasmine's words synced like a rap verse over a hip-hop beat by nightfall. The clip had been viewed millions of times. What started as a tense debate exchange had transformed into the internet's latest obsession. Memes spread faster than anyone could keep track of. One compared Donald's expression to a Wi-Fi signal cutting out mid-sentence. Another showed him with captions like, "When you study the wrong chapter for the exam." Jasmine, on the other hand, was painted as the calm warrior, her still, deliberate delivery contrasted against Donald's frantic body language. The duality made the story irresistible. Panic versus poise, bluster versus precision, and the internet loves a story with characters that cut. It wasn't long before late-night comedians picked up the moment. On one show, the host replayed the line 3 times in slow motion before joking, "Forget mic drop, that was a mic shatter." Another show aired a parody sketch where an actor playing Donalds tried to respond, only to be drowned out by canned audience laughter every time. Jasmine's words were repeated. The laughter carried a subtext. Donald's attempt at dominance had backfired so spectacularly that it was now comedy material, but it wasn't just entertainment. Politicians on both sides weighed in. Progressives praised Jasmine for holding her ground with dignity. One senator tweeted, "This is what leadership looks like. Grace under fire, truth over noise." Activists began circulating the clip-in fundraising emails, framing it as proof that strength doesn't require shouting. Even some conservatives admitted, grudgingly, that Donalds had been outmaneuvered. A strategist on a news panel admitted, "Look, he walked right into it. She set a trap with composure and he panicked." That's politics 101. The clash had moved beyond one moment. It had become a litmus test for how people view power. Online. The debate over the debate became its own battleground. Supporters of Donalds tried to spin it as media bias, claiming the audience reaction was overblown. But the raw footage told another story. Unedited, unfiltered. Millions saw his stumble with their own eyes. And as with all viral moments, repetition cemented perception. Each replay deepened the narrative that Jasmine had not only won the exchange, but it exposed something larger, the fragility of loud arrogance when faced with calm truth. Within days, the incident wasn't just a trending topic, it was a cultural reference point. Commentators pointed to it as symbolic of a bigger shift, the way audiences now crave authenticity over theatrics, clarity over chaos. For Jasmine, it was proof that poise carries more weight than volume. For Donalds, it was a reminder of how quickly a misstep can define you in the digital age. But beyond the laughter, the memes and the trending hashtags, something deeper lingered. People weren't just entertained, they were reflecting. And that's where the real power of this clash lived. Because behind the viral storm, a bigger question remained. What does this moment teach us about truth, dignity, and democracy itself? In the minutes after Byron Donalds' voice cracked and his swagger slipped, something larger than a simple debate moment revealed itself. It wasn't just Jasmine Crockett winning a verbal sparring match. It was a lesson about power, truth, and the kind of leadership people crave in a political era. Flooded with noise, Donalds had walked onto that stage with volume as his weapon. He believed raising his voice would equal raising his authority. He believed mocking, interrupting, and sneering would project strength. For a while, it seemed like the audience might bend under that force. But then, Jasmine's one sentence showed the opposite. Calm truth beats empty noise. Every time her delivery wasn't dramatic. She didn't shout. She didn't match his chaos with more chaos. Instead, she embodied something rare, composure under fire. The composure made her words cut sharper than any insult Donalds had launched. Viewers at home felt it. They recognized the dignity in her approach. In workplaces, classrooms, and families across the country, people know the dynamic. The loudest person in the room is rarely the wisest. The person who keeps their cool, who stays grounded, who speaks once with precision, that's the person who shifts the entire conversation. That was the deeper lesson. Democracy does not survive on volume. It survives on clarity, on reason, on the courage to tell the truth without fear. Jasmine represented that courage, and in that moment, millions realized something else. This fight wasn't just hers. When she faced Donalds, she was standing for every person who has ever been talked over in a meeting, dismissed in a classroom, or mocked in a conversation. She was standing for the idea that arrogance can be deflated by truth. Truth doesn't need to shout. Her victory wasn't measured in applause or memes. It was measured in the reminder she gave the nation. Dignity still matters. That integrity still wins. That no amount of empty noise can drown out one clear, fearless voice. So, let's circle back to where it all began. Byron Donalds charged in with noise, arrogance, and that smug certainty that volume equals victory. But when Jasmine Crockett met his chaos with calm, everything flipped. One line, just one line, was enough to stop him cold. That's the moment. This video has been about the moment a truth spoken softly carried more weight than a storm of shouting. The moment arrogance collapsed under the pressure of dignity. The moment Jasmine showed that real strength isn't about who yells the loudest states, about who speaks with clarity, courage, and conviction. And here's the thing. This isn't just about Jasmine Crockett or Byron Donalds. It's about us. Every time we choose truth over noise, dignity over arrogance, calm over chaos, we're standing for something bigger. We're proving that democracy, respect, and integrity still matter. If that's a fight you believe in, then don't just watch, join in. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story where truth breaks through the noise. And most importantly, stand with truth, because the more voices we add to this movement, the harder it becomes for arrogance and empty noise to drown us out. This isn't Jasmine's fight alone. It's not mine alone. It belongs to every single one of us who refuses to be silenced by the loudest person in the room, because in the end, noise fades, but truth lasts.